morning is with Mable Durrance Sweat. Mrs. Sweat was born June 10th, 1913, which means that she recently had a birthday.
Yes.
And that means that she just turned 80 a few days ago. Mrs. Sweat was born in Mulberry. And is that
that's
right?
my address now.
Oh, you're from Mulberry right
I
now.
was born in the Polk County, but near the Hardy County line.
Near the Hardy County line. And where did your family live? Was it near Fort Meade at that time?
I think it was near the Bowling Green.
Near the Bowling Green. Okay. And what kind of business was your family in? What did they do for a living?
Well, Daddy farmed at first, but he prospected, prospected for the mines.
For phosphate?
To find the phosphate.
I see.
And that's why he was going from home so much, because he did, have to go.
So he worked as an employee of the mines to find new veins of phosphate.
Yeah.
I see.
He liked to have those times because he always got more money. And then they kept him on a lower salary, in between time.
But the more he found, the more he made, right?
Yeah. The more times he got to prospect, the more money he made.
Right. Okay, and how many brothers and sisters did you have in your family?
I had one sister older and 4 brothers younger. There were 6 of us.
Oh, 6 of you in all.
2 girls and 4 boys. And I'm thankful to say that all of them are living. And we all real close, except our Richard is in California. He's next to the baby one. And he's in California, so he doesn't get to go but about once every 2 years. But
does everybody still live in Florida other than your brother?
Yes, right around here so we can get together.
Oh, well, that makes it great for reunions and such, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And you see each other often.
Yeah.
Well, let's go back to some of those early days in Polk County. Where did you first go to school in Polk County?
Fort Meade. I started at Fort Meade. And
you need this to give us some information?
No, I didn't put out the teachers on that.
Okay.
But Ruth Patterson, who later married the McLean, was my teacher. And Irene Hammett, who married Dr. Lindsay, was the other teacher in the far end. We were on this end, and she was at that end.
Of what?
Of the auditorium. So evidently it was a busy time, They had not enlarged the school from the war times.
Overcrowding is nothing new in Polk County schools.
See, that was 1919 that I started the school.
Oh, I see.
And I remember...
Right at the end of World War I.
And I remember that the teacher said, now you've got to keep your head down, because they were practicing for the senior play in there. You can imagine little youngsters trying to keep their head down here. We would be scooting their heads around to try to see
what they barely peering over the seats.
So we could see what was going on up there on the stage. But I knew it had to be a time when of overcrowding, because they wouldn't have had 2 teachers in the same room like that.
Now that was the old brick schoolhouse down there that was later torn down, right? Yes.
And we were in this end, and Miss Ruth Patterson was in the other end.
In the auditorium.
And later we knew her real well, because she married the McLean and lived out at Brewster and taught at Brewster.
Oh, and you later lived.
We said we were raised at Brewster, because we were there more years, all there now.
And so you had your first grade teacher again later on at Brewster?
Yes.
Well, that's wonderful. I'm sure you have a lot of memories since you had that teacher more than 1 year. Can you tell us something about your school days? What do you remember most about your school days and how things went in school?
Well, at Tiger Bay.
Tiger Bay was near Brewster.
No, it was near Fort Meade. It's only about 2 miles out of Fort Meade.
That's one of those old communities that
has disappeared now. Just like Pierce, you see, almost all mine left and all. But they had some foreign men. We couldn't understand what they said. that made a pathway so that the village children could walk and take a side street and the side road, you know, to get to the school. And it's supposed to have been about halfway between the country children and the village children.
For everybody's
And
convenience.
that's was some, when I was in the, partly in the first grade, because
I see.
we had moved from Fort Meade to there.
Okay.
And,
During
oh, yeah,
first grade.
and that's right, I had been promoted to the second grade.
Okay.
And Mr. Porter, who was very important in Bartow's history later, was the teacher for us, first 4 grades. And they were in the Wheeler's readers. And they were reading about Longfellow and all those names, you know,
Right.
about the town, Massachusetts and Boston and all that. And I was as dumb as I could be. I'd had Baby Ray and the easy, the easy Child's World series.
I have seen copies of the old Baby Ray
And
readers.
so he thought I was terrible, and he thought that maybe I didn't even belong in the second grade that I had been promoted to. But Mama got him to let me bring a book home, and she drilled, and then after 2 weeks, he put me back in the second grade after a lot of crying and a lot.
And he found that you really could do it, and you were smarter than he had given you credit for to begin with. You know, that's an interesting thing, because what you're talking about is the difference between what they call a basal reader, I think, and another kind of reading book that takes a literature approach to things. And there's still the same kind of argument going on between which is better this many years later. And I think that's a very interesting commentary on education then and now. Well, tell us about the later years. How far did you go in school back there?
I believe that I was in the 3rd grade when we moved to Pierce.
To Pierce,
Uh-huh.
in southwestern Polk County.
And we didn't stay there too long before we moved to Brewster, so we stayed raised in Brewster,
I see.
because I think I was in the 4th grade when we went to Brewster.
And again, your father was involved with mining,
Yes.
right? Phosphate mining.
Always. And he was the one that was the head of the prospectors.
I see.
And our second brother was not very well. He was Mama's sickliest child out of the 6. And when he was 8 years old, Dad was prospecting, took him out with him out on the prospecting camp. And after then, he was as well as the rest of us.
After he got used to the outdoors.
The outdoors and the eating that they did out there and just running around, I guess, and having all the attention from the men that were working.
Became a robust boy.
Yes.
That's great.
Healthy as the rest of us.
Yeah.
He lives here in Bartow.
He does.
Freeman. He's married to Adele Beavis.
I see. Well, did you ever see any of the actual mining that went on back in those days, early in this century? Did you ever get to go out to one of the fields where they were actually mining?
Well, I stood on the bank and I've seen them shoot the boulder.
Yes.
Phosphate that part, because we had campfire girls when I was coming up. My sister was the one that was the leader, and we would go hiking out, and sometimes we stood on the bank and watched those things going on.
Did in those days they didn't have the huge drag lines that they do now.
No, they just had the water power that they knocked it
They
out.
washed it out. Yeah. How did they? Yeah. Did they have just kind of like an early version of a steam shovel to actually dig the earth and
That
then
part
wash?
I don't actually remember, but I
Okay.
guess they did, because didn't they have what they called ground hoist?
I believe so.
Something like that.
I've seen pictures of the early phosphate mining equipment, and of course it's come a long way over the years. I mean from actual pick and shovels, years and years ago in streams and that kind of thing, down to the washing process that you were talking about, and digging the the gigantic holes and such. But it's really, really evolved
Yes.
over the years. There's a lot of technology involved in it. Now, in later years, I believe you've lived in Mulberry. Is that correct?
Well, Mulberry is our address, but we have, Pierce sold the houses to the people, and we moved ours out to what's called Pinedale.
You moved your house.
About 2 miles south of Mulberry.
How long have you lived in that house?
Oh, that's a lot. I'd say about 40 years.
About 40 years. That's great to say that you had the same home for that long
About
in your
that long,
life.
35.
Not many of us can say
35.
that anymore.
Because they did sell the houses real cheap. $200, I think, we gave for our house, and they brought it out.
Just to get it off the land.
We had the village then, and I'm still right in that same spot where we were put down, and my sister is still just catty-cornered across the street. She lives in a 2-story house because her husband worked in the office, so he rated that kind. My husband worked in the mines, so he rated one of the other kind.
I see. And so your family has actually been associated with phosphate all your life, since the
All
day you were
my
born.
memory, yes, all of my memories.
That is
Yes,
really-
that phosphate.
That's a remarkable thing, to have that long an association with the same industry for one family. Are any of your present day, of course your brothers or sisters would be retired now,
Oh, yes,
but
all of us.
were they associated with phosphate also?
Yes,
Okay. And
all of them worked for the mines at one time.
I see.
But,
Do they have any offspring today who are associated with the mines, or do you?
yeah.
You don't. Okay. Did you have any children?
Yes, I lost my first baby because of bad kidney trouble. It was just before the wonder drugs came in, and she was born 6 weeks too soon in the Tampa hospital. I was over there, and then I didn't have any more until 1948. Jim was born, my only son, and I have one grandson.
Oh,
So that's
do they live near here?
Jim's in Tampa.
I see. Okay.
He's working out.
So you're able to see.
Yeah, he comes real often.
Well, that's wonderful. Well, going back a ways, were you living in the Mulberry area, say, during World War II?
Yes, because we went to Mulberry to school. See, Brewster didn't teach all through.
Right.
And I always was just a grade ahead of what they were teaching, so I went 11th and 12th grade
At
at Brewster. In Mulberry, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, went through the 10th
Uh-huh.
at Brewster, and then we were transported, or we had to pay our way because we went in a car, you know, in carload of it. I remember that the Winchester boy drove 1 year and carried a carload.
So you would share transportation in order to
My
get to
sister
school.
went first year, and then the next year I drove. That's from Melvin Winchester. Drove it, and there were about 5 kids of us, you know, that were in the high school there, because Brewster had not put on the 11th and 12th. They had to be the 10th, so they had to go to 11th and 12th.
Well, that's amazing to think back at that point in time that Brewster actually had up through the 10th grade. I mean, that's amazing to think of that. I mean, it shows you that it was once a thriving little community.
And Miss Patterson, maybe I've already told you this, but Miss Patterson married a man and lived in Brewster and taught in Brewster. So 2 times.
Oh, my goodness. That's really,
Later.
that's ironic. I wanted to ask something else that we're interested in today, because you may have noticed out there a collection of old toys that is on display for today's Pioneer Luncheon. Can you bring to mind anything in the way of games or toys that used to be popular when you were growing up?
I had a doll that had artificial limb, you know, from here to here, And I remember the poor things, that got broken and fell off. And I kept on loving that doll, and she just had partial arms.
Like a good friend that you couldn't give up.
Yeah, it's hard to give up my doll.
True. I guess dolls have just been one of the most popular playthings for girls, especially down through the years.
Okay,
And still are.
little girls mostly, although some girls are more athletic and want to do other things,
Yeah.
more like boys.
Yeah, we find a lot of that, don't we? What about games and toys at home with the family? Do you remember any particular? I know that there was a lot of game playing as recreation for families back then compared to now.
Well, I know that my mother always read to us from the Bible, from stories, because especially in the wintertime when it was darkness came on early, and we weren't quite ready to go to
Yes.
bed. I can remember us being sitting around and Mama reading
Yes.
to us.
And that was story time and Bible reading time for the whole family.
Yeah.
Well, that was certainly something.
Daddy worked shifts,
Uh-huh.
so a lot of times he wasn't there, because he was on work to 3 to 11. They had, what they did, switch around. He'd have the day shift and the 3 to 11 shift and the night shift, and then change again. Go back and start the same thing over again. That was the way they worked it then. So they wouldn't be on the same thing all the time.
Now, when were you married?
1932.
1932.
Yeah, I married James Claiborne Sweat. He was born and raised in the edge of Hillsborough County,
I see.
but he worked.
So he was a real
He worked there.
Florida pioneer too.
He worked there in the filling station and in the store in Brewster. That's how I met him. We got to go together and we were married.
And you were married in Mulberry or Brewster?
I was married in the schoolhouse
In the school.
in Brewster because the Negroes, the black people, had 2 churches, one in that part of town and one in the other part of town. But the white people had to use the auditorium of the school.
I
That
see.
was always the place where we had church, was in the auditorium of the Brewster School.
Well, that's
So I
any
got,
particular denomination, or was it interdenominational?
the Methodist preacher came sometime, and the
Right.
Baptist preacher came sometime
Okay.
from Mulberry.
Okay.
And preached for us, because I remember we would go to church in the afternoons instead of morning or night, so but they were just being kind to come out and preach for us.
And I suppose that was partly too because of transportation. It wasn't as easy to get around at that time, and for people to travel
Yeah.
distances to get to church and things like that.
Yes, we thought we were going a pretty good ways to school, just from Brewster to Mulberry.
Oh, I'm sure you
We'd
did.
have to get up and get off early,
Yes.
get there on time. Of course, you didn't drive as fast. The roads were not as good. And I remember it was the time when the flyboys were, they thought it was a good joke to stop the car and make all of us crawl out. There were certain parts of it were quarantined for something, some kind of flies that got started. And so they had this place between Mulberry and Brewster. So we
Now-
all...
Now, who were these flyboys?
They were the ones that, I guess they worked for WPA or something, and were supposed to be examining to see if you had anything that would be carrying the flies from one part of the county to the other.
I wonder if that was the Mediterranean fruit fly.
Fly,
Was
that's
that?
what it was,
Yes.
Do you remember that?
Oh, yeah, that's really a part of Polk County's history, because we've had those Mediterranean fruit fly infestations over different
Periods of time.
And that's the first time I've heard anybody talk about that in a long time.
That's when I was a junior and a senior in high school. I had to go the last 2 years to Mulberry.
That would have
They
been,
just put on another grade in Brewster. I was always a grade ahead of what was right when I graduated from Brewster with the others.
right. Well, that's an interesting point too. after you were married, now of course you finished high school and everything, so
Yeah.
were you employed outside the home anywhere?
Oh, not at first. Of course, I lost that baby, and then I decided I would take the teacher's exam. And I did, and I got a second grade certificate, which entitled me to teach little ones. And so I taught 2 years down in Manatee County at Duet,
Yes.
where the road forks and goes over the other way. And that was the beginning of my teaching period. And then I taught 40 years. I stayed out 4 years when I had Jim, my son,
And
who's now
taught 40
46.
years.
Yeah, 42 years, really.
Oh, what a wonderful career. Tell me the schools where you taught,
Well,
besides Manatee, you mentioned
I
that.
taught at the Duet in Manatee County, and then I moved to Pinecrest in Hillsborough County because we lived on a farm out here, Prairie's people at that time, my husband's people. And then I taught at Mobile a long time
Where did you retire?
from Mobile.
From Mulberry. And at which school were you in?
I was in Kingsford because I taught first graders.
Yes, 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 and I'm acquainted with all the schools in that area because I too was associated with the school system for a long, long time.
Well, I taught over in what is now the Purcell School,
Yes.
right from back of the Baptist Church.
Which was the old high school,
Mhm,
right?
The old high school.
Mhm.
I taught there
Yes.
a year or two before they got the other school opened up.
Yes.
And I taught the longest time there.
Right. Well, can you tell me something? What are your best memories about teaching school in Mulberry?
Well, I know that we had good principals. That was that said, you do what you think is best, and would back us up. You know, I had very few discipline problems because they knew that if they didn't behave, they could be taken to the principal's office.
And you probably had the backing of the parents too.
Most of them. You always have a few that think their child is always right. The teacher's not right. Their child.
I don't think that's been any different since the beginning of time. do you?
Probably not, but most parents were very, very cooperative.
Supportive. What kinds of changes stand out in your mind that you witnessed through the years in education?
Oh, there's so much more of different things that the children are allowed to do now in school that they weren't back at first. And they do have some advantages that we didn't have. We didn't have a music teacher a lot of the time in the school. You did your own in the room, you sang your little songs and talked. Did what you could. But
Well, you had a long and wonderful career then, and to me, it is obvious that you have warm memories.
yes, wait till you interview my sister before she taught 52 years.
That's kidding. Do we get to interview her today?
Yeah, well, supposed to.
That's wonderful. Oh, I didn't realize that both of you were going to be here. That's a wonderful thing. Glad to know that. Well,
Never been interviewed.
what were there any other particular events or items that you wanted to tell us about in connection with your long association with Polk County?
No, down there, I see I had cane grinding on the list.
Oh, well, I'd love
In the Sweat family, they always, around cane, it made syrup because Grandpa Sweat thought he couldn't eat without syrup. He poured syrup on everything he had.
Now that was in Hillsborough County,
Yeah,
where
the
they
edge of Hillsborough County.
right?
And we always went to the cane grinding. Everybody went to the cane grinding.
How was that cane grinding done?
The horse went round and round. Later years, they used a tractor, but when I first was in the family, it was the horse.
Still a horse.
Yeah, old Major, they called him. Went round.
Hitched to that long pole, and the cane grinder was at the end of that pole.
And the one that stood there and fed the meal, called the juice. And Grandma Sweat was the one that made the syrup.
Yes.
I don't know
In the
why.
big kettle.
Yeah, in the big kettle, the wash kettle, that she washed clothes in at other times. And boil those clothes such a long time. We don't think that's necessary. But she was really the driving force. Grandpa Sweat was not too well, he was weakly. So she was the one that's.
But she was doing that at an advanced age, right?
Yeah, right. She was quite old.
Well, that's a wonderful memory too. And that's something that we've more or less lost. We just don't think about those things anymore, but they are really not that far removed from us in time, because there are still people like you who can remember things
Up
like
to
that.
a year ago, the grandson of the Sweats would make a little syrup every year, but I think he stopped now, retired. He works for the Phosphate Mine and he doesn't have time. So that part is different.
But a real part of our heritage,
Yeah.
our pioneer heritage, it certainly is. Do you have any other particular memories, for example, of the World War eras, World War I, World War II?
Well, Daddy didn't have to go to that First World War because he was married with children. But our brothers all served in World War II, and we were just so thankful to get them back home. So many people lost.
No casualties.
Yeah. All four got to come back.
How fortunate.
Yes, we were very, very fortunate. Much praying on my mama's part.
I'm sure. I'm sure. And what did they serve in? What branches of service?
Well, one brother, Freeman, the second brother, was in the jungle fighting because they were turned loose and they were just on their own trying to escape over where was the jungle fighting. There, I've forgotten, but it was way overseas.
Well, in the Pacific,
In the Pacific.
there was a great deal of that.
Yeah,
Many of the Pacific Islands.
that's true. I know they were scattered out and were hiding out, but they managed to get through and not be caught, so they all got back home again, which was wonderful considering we had four that were all over the world.
Well, it's great that they
Yeah,
did
they did.
all manage to get safely back home after the war.
Yes.
Do you have any particular memories of where you were living?
Her name was Catherine, and I was named for her.
So your ancestors really go all the way
Yeah.
back to the very first
Yes, we don't
settlers in
know
Polk County.
too much about our parish ancestry, which was Mama's family, because my grandfather and his sister were young teenagers, and evidently their parents must have died, but the people from North Florida brought them down up to, with them on a wagon train, and they went to the West Coast first, and then they branched out from there. They went to Florida, way back.
Yes.
So that was a way back.
Yeah, that was before the Civil War.
But we just don't know anything about our
But
parish ancestry except Grandpa Parish himself.
how very interesting that you've had people here that long. There are marked graves to
Yes.
show when they were born and how long they lived, and that they've been all in this same relative area for that.
New Hope and
Long.
Payne's Creek's where our grandparents are buried.
I see.
And that-
Well, it is really an honor to me to talk to a sure enough, genuine
Polk County native.
Polk County native, and probably a fifth or sixth generation Floridian.
Yes.
I would say that you're among a handful, a very select few who can claim that honor. And it's really a joy to have you with us today and to be able to interview you.
Well, I'm glad to come.
Thank you very much.